Hegel's Dialectic, the power of contradiction in shaping history. Are you ready to see conflict as the engine of progress? What if the clash of opposing ideas isn't chaos at all, but the spark of evolution? Today, we're diving into a concept that might flip the way you see history and even your own growth. We're talking about Hegel's dialectic, a process where every idea is born from its own contradiction. Picture a world where every conflict isn't a failure, but a chance to build something entirely new. Imagine a time when nothing seemed to work out, when every setback felt like the end. Now, what if I told you that those setbacks were actually the first step in creating something better? Today, we'll break down the cycle of thesis, antithesis, and synthesis and show how contradictions shape both history and personal growth. Think back to a moment when you had two choices, two sides of a coin that seemed completely at odds with each other. Maybe it was choosing between what you really wanted and what you felt you had to do. Imagine a seed growing in rocky soil. The seed faces the hard, unyielding earth, yet it pushes through to find sunlight. That struggle, that conflict between the seed's desire to grow and the resistance of the soil, is the heart of the dialectic. This process isn't just about nature. It's the same dynamic that drives human progress. Every great change in history, whether it's a revolution, an innovation, or even a personal breakthrough, comes from the friction between two opposing forces. Hegel's dialectic is all about understanding change through contradictions. In simple terms, it works like this: thesis, antithesis, synthesis. Think of it like mixing colors. Imagine you start with blue, the thesis. Then you add yellow, the antithesis. What do you get? Green, the synthesis. The thesis is your starting point, the idea that seems to be the clear truth. It could be a belief you hold, a system in place, or even the status quo of a society. Examples in history: a monarch ruling with absolute power, an established scientific theory that explains the world. In your own life, the habits you've built and the beliefs that guide your decisions. The thesis feels solid and complete, but it's only half the story. It's like a painting with only one color. It makes sense until you realize there's another hue waiting to be discovered. Now comes the twist. The antithesis is the force that challenges the thesis. It's the contradiction, the conflict that seems to tear everything apart at first glance. Historical challenges, when people rebelled against unfair kings and demanded a voice, when new scientific ideas clashed with long-held beliefs. Personal challenges, moments when your routine is disrupted, times when you question the habits you thought defined you. Imagine you're walking down a familiar path and suddenly you hit a roadblock. That obstacle forces you to find a new way forward. Out of the conflict comes the synthesis, the new idea, the resolution that carries the best parts of both the thesis and the antithesis. It's like turning two opposing forces into one powerful force for change. In history, the rise of democratic ideas after centuries of absolute rule. The development of modern science after challenging old rigid theories. In personal growth, learning from failures to build better habits. Combining your strengths with your challenges to form a stronger self. The beauty of Hegel's dialectic is that it doesn't stop at one conflict. Life and history are full of cycles. Every synthesis eventually becomes a new thesis, a starting point for the next round of contradiction and growth. Historical cycles. Empires rise, face challenges, and then transform or fall. Scientific revolutions occur as old ideas are questioned and improved. Personal cycles. Every setback in life is an opportunity to learn and evolve. The habits you refine and reinvent over time build on what worked and shed what didn't. Even though the dialectic shows us that conflict is necessary for growth, it's not always easy to embrace. Many of us fear contradiction because it forces us to question what we believe is safe and true. The cost of avoiding conflict, stagnation. When we refuse to question, we never grow. Missed opportunities to learn and evolve. I remember a time when I was stuck in a job that didn't feel right. I had built my entire identity around that role, believing it defined me. But deep down, I knew something was off. Every day, I battled with the idea that I wasn't living the life I truly wanted. That inner conflict was my antithesis, the challenge to my thesis of I am who I am because of my job. One day, I decided to confront that feeling instead of pushing it aside. I started asking myself tough questions. What do I really want? What parts of me were being ignored? Slowly, I began to see a new path emerging, one that blended the security of my past with the promise of something more meaningful. That was my synthesis. Key lessons from this journey. Don't be afraid of the inner storms. See conflict as a signal that growth is happening. Allow yourself to be reshaped by your experiences. Now let's zoom out and see how this process has shaped entire eras of human history. Consider the great revolutions that changed the world. Each time, a dominant idea was challenged by a counter-idea, and out of that conflict emerged a new, evolved. Example 1, political change. For centuries, monarchies ruled with absolute power. The growing discontent among people formed the antithesis. The result was the birth of democracies, where power is shared and voices are heard. Example 2, scientific revolutions. Newton's laws reigned as the truth about the physical world. New discoveries and anomalies challenged these ideas, leading to modern physics, a synthesis that expands on the old ideas. When ideas collide, the role of contradiction in innovation. The dialectic isn't only about grand historical shifts, it's also the driving force behind everyday innovation. Your favorite invention might have been born from challenging the status quo. Every time you learn something new or change your routine, you're experiencing the dialectic in action. Your growth happens when you let go of outdated habits and embrace fresh ideas. The turning point, recognizing the value in conflict. At some point, you face a challenge so intense that it forces you to completely reevaluate your path. That's the climax of the dialectical process, the moment when every contradiction becomes an opportunity, a moment of clarity. You might realize that the tension you've been fighting isn't a sign of failure, but a sign of growth. It's the universe's way of telling you that you're ready to evolve. The breakthrough. In that instant, the pieces of the puzzle start to fit together. The opposition fades, and you see the new picture emerging, a synthesis that is stronger and more complete than the sum of its parts. Now that we've walked through the cycle of thesis, antithesis, and synthesis, it's clear that conflict is not the enemy. It's the fuel that drives evolution in history and in our lives. The real-world impact. Look around at the world today. The inventions, revolutions, and innovations we take for granted are the result of ideas clashing and coming together in new ways. A new way of seeing the world. When you recognize that every struggle has a hidden gift, setbacks become precursors to breakthroughs. What appears as chaos may be the prelude to a beautiful synthesis, the moment of transformation. There comes a time when the push and pull of opposing ideas shape you in unexpected ways. Every contradiction contributes to the person you are today. A call to embrace contradiction. Take a moment to think about the conflicts in your own life. Instead of dreading them, See them as invitations to grow. The next challenge might be the start of something new. The big picture. Hegel's Dialectic reminds us that history is not a straight line. It's a dance of ideas, conflicts, and resolutions. Every revolution and personal breakthrough is part of this grand tapestry. Bringing it all home. Hegel's Dialectic isn't just a theory in dusty books. It's a living process that explains how ideas clash and combine to create something greater. It's behind revolutions, breakthroughs, and your own personal growth. Every moment of contradiction in your life is like a spark. It's the start of a new idea, a fresh beginning, a chance to rewrite your story. See these sparks as opportunities, not obstacles. Curious to see what other powerful ideas can reshape your perspective? Check out the next video and continue exploring the incredible journey of ideas.